The restaurant was one of those fancy places where everything cost too much, and the lighting was kept dim on purpose. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and soft piano music played in the background. It was the kind of place where people celebrated important moments, where families laughed together over expensive meals. But tonight, at a corner table near the window, a 17-year-old girl sat completely alone. Her name was Claire, and she was staring at the most beautiful birthday cake she'd ever seen. 3 layers of vanilla cream with fresh strawberries between each layer. 17 candles flickered on top, their small flames dancing in the air conditioning. The cake was perfect. The table was perfect. The restaurant was perfect. Everything except the empty chairs around her. Claire adjusted herself in her wheelchair, trying to sit up straighter. She'd been here for almost 2 hours now. First, she'd waited in the lobby. Then the hostess, with a sympathetic smile that made Claire's stomach turn, had seated her at this table. The waiter had brought water, then bread, then asked 3 times if she wanted to order. Each time, Claire had said the same thing. "I'm waiting for someone." But deep down she knew. Her father wasn't coming. The text message on her phone confirmed it. She'd read it at least 10 times already, even though she'd memorized every word after the first time. Emergency board meeting. Can't make it. Sorry, sweetheart. We'll celebrate this weekend, promise. Claire had heard that promise before. Last month when he'd missed her doctor's appointment. The month before that, when he'd canceled their planned movie night. And the month before that, and the month before that. Her father, Daniel Richardson, was the CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the country. He was important. He was busy. He had responsibilities. And apparently his daughter's 17th birthday wasn't one of them. A waiter approached her table, younger than the others, maybe in his early 20s. He had kind eyes, but Claire could see the pity in them too. That look. She'd gotten so used to that look over the past 3 years. "Miss, would you like us to light the candles now, or would you prefer to wait a bit longer?" Claire glanced around the restaurant. Other families were eating together. A couple in the corner was celebrating an anniversary. A group of friends at a large table was laughing loudly, probably someone's promotion or engagement. "Everyone had someone. You can light them," she said quietly. "I don't think anyone else is coming." The waiter nodded and walked away. Claire felt her throat tighten. She would not cry, not here. Not in front of all these people who were probably already feeling sorry for her. The girl in the wheelchair, all alone on her birthday. What a sad sight. She hated pity more than anything. The accident had happened 3 years ago. She'd been 14, sitting in the back seat of her mother's car. They were driving home from a piano recital. Claire had played Chopin, and her mother had been so proud. Then, out of nowhere, a truck ran a red light. The impact was on the driver's side. Her mother died instantly. Claire's spine was injured. The doctors said she'd never walk again. After that, everything changed. Her father, who had always been busy, became even more distant. He couldn't look at her wheelchair without his face going pale. He couldn't talk about her mother without leaving the room. So he did what he knew best. He worked. He buried himself in meetings and business deals and international calls. He hired the best physical therapist money could buy. He got her the most advanced wheelchair available. He paid for private tutors so she could study at home. He gave her everything except himself. Claire looked down at her hands. They were shaking slightly. She clasped them together in her lap, willing them to stop. The waiter returned with a long lighter and carefully lit each of the 17 candles. Other staff members gathered nearby, ready to sing. This was probably part of their job, making sure the lonely birthday girl got some kind of celebration. But before they could start singing, Claire held up her hand. "Please don't," she said softly. "I'd rather just sit here for a moment." The staff nodded and dispersed, leaving her alone with her cake and her thoughts. Through the window beside her table, Claire could see the parking lot. Expensive cars reflected the restaurant's lights. Somewhere out there, her father's driver was probably circling the block waiting to take her home. Her father had arranged everything. The reservation, the cake, the driver, everything except his own presence. Claire felt a familiar ache in her chest. It wasn't the kind of pain that came from her injury. This was different. This was the pain of being forgotten, of being too difficult to face, of being a reminder of everything her father had lost. She understood in a way. Looking at her must be hard for him. The wheelchair was a constant reminder of the accident, of her mother, of how their perfect life had shattered in an instant, but understanding didn't make it hurt any less. A burst of laughter came from across the restaurant. Claire looked up and saw a family at a nearby table. A father, 2 kids. The younger one, a little girl maybe 7 or 8 years old, was giggling at something her older brother had said. The father was smiling, completely present, completely engaged with his children. Claire felt a sharp pang of jealousy. When was the last time her father had laughed with her like that? When was the last time they'd had a real conversation? Not just him asking if she needed anything and her saying no. The little girl suddenly noticed Claire watching them. Her eyes went wide with curiosity, especially when she saw the birthday cake with its lit candles. She tugged on her father's sleeve urgently, whispering something Claire couldn't hear. Claire quickly looked away, embarrassed. The last thing she wanted was to be the object of some child's curiosity or worse, some family's pity project. She'd had enough of that at her old school before the accident. The whispers, the stares, the overly cheerful attempts at inclusion that just made her feel more isolated. That's why she'd asked to be homeschooled. At least at home, she didn't have to see the way people looked at her. At least at home, she could pretend things were normal, except things weren't normal. And sitting here alone in this fancy restaurant with a beautiful cake and no one to share it with made that painfully clear. The candles were starting to melt, wax dripping down onto the frosting. Claire should probably blow them out soon, or maybe she should just let them burn down completely. What was the point of making a wish anyway? What could she possibly wish for that would make any difference? She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. This was fine. She was fine. In a few minutes, she'd blow out the candles, the staff would box up the cake, and the driver would take her home to the empty house where she'd spend the rest of her birthday alone. Just like she spent most days, this was just another day. Another disappointment, another reminder that she was on her own. But then Claire heard footsteps approaching her table. She opened her eyes, expecting to see the waiter returning to check on her again. Instead, she saw the father from across the restaurant, with his 2 children standing beside him. The little girl was looking at her with bright, hopeful eyes. The older boy seemed more hesitant but not unkind, and the father had the strangest expression on his face. Not pity, not sympathy, something else entirely. "Excuse me," he said gently, his voice warm and genuine. "My daughter noticed it's your birthday and, well..." He paused, glancing at his children, then back at Claire. "We were wondering if maybe we could join you?" Nobody should have to celebrate their birthday alone. Claire stared at him, completely speechless. In all the scenarios she'd imagined for this evening, this had never been one of them. Claire's mind went blank. She'd spent the last 2 hours preparing herself for loneliness, for disappointment, for going home with nothing but a boxed cake and another broken promise. She hadn't prepared for this, for strangers wanting to sit with her, for kindness from people who owed her nothing. She started, but the words caught in her throat. The little girl stepped forward, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "We saw you sitting here all by yourself, and that made me really sad because birthdays are supposed to be happy. So I asked my dad if we could come say hello and maybe sing to you. Is that okay?" There was something about the child's honesty that caught Claire off guard. No pity, no awkward politeness, just pure, genuine concern from one human being to another. "I don't want to interrupt your dinner," Claire managed to say, though part of her desperately wanted them to stay. The father smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way that made Claire's chest ache. When was the last time someone had smiled at her like that? Like she was a person, not a problem to be solved or a tragedy to be pitied. "You wouldn't be interrupting anything," he said. "Actually, my kids already finished eating. We were about to order dessert, but honestly, your cake looks way better than anything on the menu." He winked at his daughter, who giggled. The older boy, who looked about 10, finally spoke up. "I'm David, that's my little sister, Lily, and that's our dad, James." He paused, then added, "We don't usually talk to random people in restaurants." But Lily was really insistent. "Very insistent," James confirmed with a laugh. "She has a way of making things happen when she sets her mind to something." Claire felt a small smile forming on her lips, the first real smile she'd had all evening. "I'm Claire," she said softly. "And yes, you can join me. I'd actually really like that." Lily let out a small squeal of happiness and immediately pulled out the chair next to Claire, climbing up with the boundless energy only young children seem to possess. David took the seat across from them, and James sat at the end of the table, close enough to be part of the group but respectful of Claire's space. The waiter appeared almost immediately, looking surprised but pleased at the turn of events. He brought extra plates and forks without being asked, and Claire noticed him exchange a knowing glance with James. Later she would learn that James had quietly spoken to the staff before approaching her table, just to make sure it was appropriate. "Okay, so we have to sing first," Lily announced with the authority of someone who'd clearly thought this through. "But we need to sing it really good, not like those boring restaurant versions. We need to do it with feeling." David rolled his eyes but smiled. "Lily takes singing very seriously." "Music is important," Lily said matter-of-factly. Then she looked at Claire with sudden concern. "Do you like singing? Because if you don't, we can skip it. This is your birthday, so you get to decide." The consideration in that simple question nearly broke Claire. When was the last time someone had asked her what she wanted? Really asked, not just assumed. "I like singing," Claire said, and realized she meant it. "I used to play piano, actually, before." She gestured vaguely at her wheelchair, then immediately regretted it. Why had she brought that up? But Lily's eyes just grew wider with interest. "Really? That's so cool. I take piano lessons, but I'm not very good yet. I can only play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and Mary Had a Little Lamb. Those are great songs to start with," Claire said, feeling herself relax slightly. "I started with those too." James cleared his throat gently. "So singing first, then cake? Is that the plan?" "That's the plan," Lily confirmed. She took a deep breath, and then, without any self-consciousness whatsoever, began to sing. "Happy birthday to you." David joined in, his voice deeper and slightly embarrassed but sincere. James sang too, his voice warm and steady. Other diners started to notice, and gradually, more voices joined in. The couple celebrating their anniversary, a businessman at the bar, even the staff members who'd been too hesitant to sing earlier. The restaurant filled with the sound of "Happy Birthday," and Claire felt tears streaming down her face before she could stop them. But these weren't tears of sadness. These were tears of something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Connection, belonging, being seen. When the song ended, the entire restaurant broke into applause. Lily was beaming, looking incredibly proud of herself. David was grinning too, though he tried to hide it, and James was watching Claire with an expression of gentle understanding, like he knew exactly what this moment meant to her. "Make a wish," Lily whispered urgently, "and make it a good one." Claire closed her eyes. For the first time in 3 years, she had something to wish for. Not to walk again, not to bring her mother back, not even for her father to show up. She wished for something simpler and somehow more profound. She wished to feel this connected, this alive, more often. She blew out all 17 candles in one breath, and Lily cheered. The waiter helped cut the cake, distributing slices to everyone at the table. As they ate, something magical happened. They started talking, really talking, the way people do when they're not trying to impress each other or fill awkward silence. Lily asked questions that other people would be too polite to ask. "Why do you have a wheelchair? Were you born like that? Does it hurt? Can you do tricks with it?" Claire found herself answering honestly without the defensive wall she usually put up. "I was in a car accident 3 years ago. I wasn't born like this. I used to walk. It doesn't hurt anymore, not physically anyway. And yes, I can do some tricks, though I haven't in a while." "That's sad about the accident," Lily said simply. "But the tricks part sounds cool. Can you show us sometime?" There was no pity in her voice, just curiosity and acceptance. It was refreshing in a way Claire couldn't quite explain. David was quieter, but he asked thoughtful questions about her homeschooling and what she liked to study. When she mentioned she loved reading, his whole face lit up. "Me too. What kind of books do you like?" They spent 10 minutes discussing their favorite series, debating character choices and plot twists with the intensity only true book lovers can muster. It felt normal. It felt wonderful. James mostly listened, occasionally adding a comment or gentle redirection when the conversation needed it. Claire noticed the way he interacted with his children, fully present, genuinely interested in what they had to say. There was a sadness in his eyes too, though, something familiar that Claire recognized in herself. "Your kids are really great," Claire said during a moment when both children were distracted by something outside the window. James smiled, but it was tinged with something bittersweet. "They are. They're my whole world." He paused, then added quietly, "Their mother passed away 4 years ago, cancer, so it's just been the three of us for a while now." "I'm sorry," Claire said, and meant it. "I lost my mom too, in the accident." James met her eyes, and in that moment they understood each other. Two people who knew what it meant to lose someone, to have your world turned upside down, to keep going even when it felt impossible. "Is that why you're here alone?" he asked gently. "Your father?" Claire nodded. "He's a CEO, always busy, always has something more important to do." The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. "I used to be like that," James admitted. "After my wife died, I threw myself into work. I'm a teacher, but I took on extra classes, extra responsibilities, anything to avoid feeling the pain. One day Lily asked me why I was always tired, why I never played with them anymore. That woke me up. I realized I was about to lose my kids while they were still standing right in front of me." Claire felt something shift in her chest. "How did you change it?" "I made a choice. I decided that being present mattered more than being perfect, more than being busy, more than running from pain." He glanced at his children with obvious love. "I'm not saying it's easy. Some days are really hard, but they deserve a father who shows up, not just a father who provides." The words hit Claire like a gentle wave. Her father provided everything, the best doctors, the best equipment, the best education. But he didn't show up. Not really. Not in the ways that mattered. "Does it get easier?" she asked quietly. "The grief?" James considered the question carefully. "It gets different. You learn to carry it better. And you learn that you can be sad and happy at the same time. You can miss someone and still laugh. You can honor what you lost while embracing what you still have." Before Claire could respond, Lily turned back to them with a sudden announcement. "Dad, can Claire come over sometime? I want to show her my piano and maybe she can help me get better." Claire's heart jumped. The invitation was so casual, so natural, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. James looked at Claire with a question in his eyes, making sure she was comfortable. If Claire would like to, and if her father approves, that would be wonderful. "I'd really like that," Claire said, and was surprised by how much she meant it. They exchanged phone numbers, James putting Claire's contact into his phone under Claire, Lily's piano friend. As they were finishing up the last of the cake, Claire's phone buzzed. A text from her father's assistant asking if she was ready to be picked up. Reality came crashing back in. This magical evening was ending, and tomorrow she'd go back to her empty house and her lonely routine. But something had shifted. For the first time in 3 years, Claire felt a tiny spark of hope. 3 days after her birthday, Claire found herself sitting in her father's home office, phone clutched in her hand, staring at James's contact information. She'd typed and deleted a message at least 15 times. Each version felt wrong. Too eager, too formal, too desperate. Finally, she settled on something simple. "Hi, it's Claire from the restaurant. Lily mentioned coming over to practice piano. Would Saturday work?" She hit send before she could overthink it anymore, then immediately wanted to take it back. What if they'd just been polite? What if they didn't really want her to visit? What if the whole thing had been a pity gesture and she was about to embarrass herself? Her phone buzzed less than a minute later. "Saturday is perfect. Lily has been asking about you every day. She's very excited. How about 2 p.m.? We're at 847 Maple Street. Looking forward to it. James." Claire read the message 3 times, a smile spreading across her face. They actually wanted to see her. This was real. She looked up to find her father standing in the doorway of his office. He'd been home for dinner the last 2 nights, which was unusual. Even more unusual, he'd actually sat at the table with her instead of taking his food to his office. "Everything okay?" he asked, and Claire noticed he looked tired. Not just physically tired, but emotionally exhausted. "Yeah," she said. "I'm going to visit some people on Saturday. The family from the restaurant." Her father's expression flickered with something Claire couldn't quite read. Guilt, maybe, or relief that someone else was filling the gaps he'd left. "Do you need the driver to take you?" "That would be helpful, yes." He nodded and turned to leave, but then stopped. "Claire," he said without looking at her. "I'm sorry I missed your birthday. I'm sorry I keep missing everything." The apology hung in the air between them. Claire wanted to say it was okay, but it wasn't. She wanted to say she understood, but understanding didn't fix anything. So instead she said, "I know, Dad." He finally turned to face her, and Claire saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in years. Pain. Raw, unfiltered pain. "When I look at you," he said quietly, "all I see is that night. The hospital. The doctor's telling me you'd never walk again. Your mother's funeral. I see everything I couldn't protect you from. Everything I failed at. And I don't know how to get past that." Claire's throat tightened. "So you just avoid me instead?" "I'm not avoiding you. I'm providing for you. Making sure you have everything you need." "Except you," Claire said, and her voice cracked. "I need you, Dad, not your money or your driver or your guilt. Just you." Her father looked away, his jaw clenched. Claire could see him struggling with something, wrestling with emotions he'd kept buried for 3 years. But then, like always, he shut it down. "We'll talk about this later. I have a call in 5 minutes," and just like that he was gone. Claire sat there in the empty office, feeling the familiar ache of being almost reached but never quite touched. She looked back at her phone, at James's message, and felt a complicated mix of gratitude and sadness. Why could a stranger show up for her when her own father couldn't? Saturday came faster than Claire expected. She spent the morning nervously picking out what to wear, which felt ridiculous. It wasn't like she was going on a date. But she wanted to make a good impression. She wanted Lily and David to like her. She wanted this fragile new connection to be real. The driver pulled up to a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. It was nothing like Claire's sprawling estate with its manicured lawns and iron gates. This house had a small front yard with toys scattered across the grass, a basketball hoop over the garage, and flowers planted in mismatched pots on the front porch. It looked lived in. It looked like a home. Before Claire could even text to say she'd arrived, the front door burst open and Lily came running out, her face lit up with pure joy. "You came." "You actually came. David said you might not come, but I knew you would." James appeared behind her, laughing. "Lily, let Claire get out of the car first." The driver helped Claire into her wheelchair, something she usually hated having people watch. But Lily's excitement was so genuine that Claire found she didn't mind as much. David followed his father out, looking slightly embarrassed by his sister's enthusiasm, but smiling nonetheless. Come on, Lily said, practically bouncing. "I want to show you everything. My room, my piano, my fish tank, my rock collection." "Maybe let's start with getting inside the house," James suggested gently. He looked at Claire with an apologetic smile. "Fair warning, our house is not fancy. It's actually kind of chaotic." Claire navigated her wheelchair up the ramp that led to the front door. Inside, the house was exactly as James described. Lived in, comfortable. There were dishes in the sink, books piled on the coffee table, and a laundry basket sitting on the couch. But there were also photos everywhere. On the walls, on the mantel covering the refrigerator. Photos of the kids at different ages. Photos of a beautiful woman who must have been their mother. Photos of happy moments captured and treasured. In Claire's house, all the photos of her mother had been put away. Her father couldn't bear to look at them. "That's Mom," Lily said, noticing where Claire was looking. She pointed to a large photo on the wall of a woman with kind eyes and Lily's same bright smile. "She died when I was 3, so I don't remember her much. But Dad tells us stories about her all the time, so it feels like I know her." "She was beautiful," Claire said softly. "She was pretty great," David added. "She used to make up songs about everything. Like she'd sing about doing laundry or washing dishes and somehow make it fun." James's eyes were shiny, but he was smiling. "She did. She found joy in everything, even the boring stuff. I try to remember that when I'm doing the boring stuff now." They gave Claire a tour of the house. It was small compared to her mansion, but it felt warm in a way her house never did. David's room was covered in posters of his favorite books and movies. Lily's room was an explosion of colors with art projects and stuffed animals everywhere. And in the corner of the living room was an old upright piano, slightly out of tune but clearly well-loved. "Okay, so I've been practicing really hard," Lily announced, climbing onto the piano bench. "Dad said if I practice every day you might teach me something new." Claire wheeled herself next to the piano. It had been 3 years since she'd played. 3 years since she'd let herself even think about music. But now, sitting here with this eager little girl watching her with complete trust, she felt something stir in her chest. "Play what you know," Claire said. "Let me hear it." Lily launched into Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star with more enthusiasm than accuracy. She hit several wrong notes and her timing was off, but she played with such joy that Claire found herself smiling. When Lily finished, she looked up hopefully. "That was good," Claire said. "But let me show you something. Your fingers are too flat, see? You want to curve them like you're holding a ball." She positioned Lily's hands correctly and Lily tried again. This time the notes rang out clearer. Lily's eyes went wide. "It sounds better." "That's because you're using the right technique. Want to learn the next part?" For the next hour, Claire worked with Lily on the piano. It felt natural, easy, like coming home to a part of herself she'd forgotten existed. David wandered in and out, occasionally offering commentary. James sat in a nearby chair, supposedly reading a book but mostly just watching with a gentle smile. At one point, Lily looked up at Claire with sudden seriousness. "Can you play something? Something you used to play before?" Claire hesitated. "I haven't played in 3 years." "That's okay," Lily said simply. "You don't have to be perfect. Just play something you love." Claire took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. They felt foreign and familiar all at once. She started playing a piece by Chopin, the same piece she'd played the night of the accident. Her fingers stumbled at first, searching for notes they once knew by heart. But gradually muscle memory took over. The music flowed, sad and beautiful, filling the small living room with something that felt like healing. When she finished, there was silence. Then Lily whispered, "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Claire looked up to find James wiping his eyes. David was staring at her with undisguised awe, and Claire felt something break open inside her chest, something that had been locked away for too long. "Thank you," she said, and she wasn't entirely sure what she was thanking them for listening, for accepting her, for giving her a reason to play again. "No," James said quietly. "Thank you. You have no idea what a gift that was." They spent the rest of the afternoon in easy companionship. David showed Claire his favorite books and they argued playfully about which characters were the best. Lily insisted on showing Claire her rock collection, explaining in elaborate detail where she'd found each one. James made them all hot chocolate and told embarrassing stories about his kids that made everyone laugh. As the sun started to set, Claire realized she hadn't thought about her empty house or her absent father once in the last 4 hours. She'd been completely present, completely herself. It felt like breathing after holding her breath for 3 years. When it was time to leave, Lily hugged her tightly. "You'll come back, right? This isn't just a one-time thing." Claire hugged her back, fighting tears. "I'll come back. I promise." In the car on the way home, Claire looked at her phone. No messages from her father asking how it went. No missed calls. Nothing. But somehow it hurt less than it usually did, because for the first time in years, Claire had something that was just hers. A connection that wasn't about pity or obligation or guilt, just genuine friendship, and that felt like its own kind of miracle. Claire's visits to James's house became a regular thing. Every Saturday afternoon, she'd arrive to find Lily waiting excitedly by the window. They'd work on piano together, and then usually end up doing something else entirely, baking cookies that turned out lopsided but tasted good anyway, watching movies while eating too much popcorn, playing board games that Lily always insisted she'd won even when she clearly hadn't. David had warmed up to her too. He'd started recommending books and they'd formed their own little book club. Just the two of them, discussing stories over hot chocolate while Lily practiced piano in the background. Claire found herself laughing more, talking more, feeling more alive than she had in years. But at home, things stayed the same. Her father was still absent, still buried in work, still unable to look at her for more than a few seconds at a time. The contrast between her two worlds was becoming harder to ignore. It was the fourth Saturday when everything changed. Claire had just finished a piano lesson with Lily when James asked if she wanted to stay for dinner. "Nothing fancy," he said. "Just spaghetti and meatballs. But you're welcome to join us if you'd like." Claire accepted, texting her father's assistant to let the driver know she'd need a later pickup. She didn't bother texting her father directly. He never answered anyway. They were setting the table when the doorbell rang. James went to answer it, and Claire heard a voice she recognized immediately. Her father's voice. "I'm looking for my daughter." "Claire Richardson." "I was told she's here." Claire's stomach dropped. She wheeled herself toward the door to find her father standing on the porch, still in his business suit, looking completely out of place in this neighborhood. His driver waited by the car in the driveway. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Her father's eyes swept over the modest house, the toys in the yard, then landed on James with an expression Claire couldn't quite read. "Your assistant told me where you were. I wanted to pick you up myself." There was something off in his voice, something strained. James, to his credit, remained calm. "You must be Mr. Richardson. I'm James. Would you like to come in?" Claire's father hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. But he stepped inside, his expensive shoes clicking on the worn hardwood floor. Lily and David appeared from the kitchen, curious about the visitor. "Is this your dad?" Lily asked Claire with her usual lack of filter. "He looks important, and kind of scary." "Lily," James said gently, but Claire's father actually smiled, just a little. "I suppose I do look scary sometimes," he admitted. He looked at Claire. "Can we talk?" Privately. Claire's heart was pounding. Her father never came to pick her up. He never showed up unannounced. Something was wrong. "Okay." They went out to the front porch. Her father stood with his hands in his pockets, staring at the street. Claire waited, her wheelchair positioned near the door in case she needed to escape whatever was coming. Finally, he spoke. "I had lunch with someone today. A business associate. He brought his daughter with him." He paused. "She was about your age. And the whole lunch, all I could think about was how comfortable they were together, how easily they laughed, how she wasn't afraid to disagree with him." He turned to look at Claire. "And I realized I don't know how to do that with you. I don't know who you are anymore." Claire felt anger rising in her chest. "That's because you're never around to find out." "I know." His voice cracked slightly. "I know, and I don't have an excuse. I've been telling myself I was protecting you by providing for you, by making sure you had the best of everything. But the truth is, I was protecting myself, because every time I look at you, I'm reminded of the worst night of my life." "You think I'm not?" Claire's voice was louder now. "You think I don't remember? That was my worst night too, Dad. I lost Mom, I lost the ability to walk, and then I lost you because you couldn't handle looking at me anymore." Her father flinched like she'd slapped him. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Tears were streaming down Claire's face now. "I needed you. I needed my dad, and you just disappeared into your office and your meetings and your work. You gave me everything except the one thing I actually wanted. I didn't know how to help you. I didn't know what to do. You could have just been there." Claire was crying openly now. "You didn't have to fix anything. You didn't have to make it better. You just had to stay." The front door opened slightly and James's voice came through. "Everything okay out here?" Claire's father looked at James, really looked at him for the first time. "You're raising 2 kids alone?" "I am," James said quietly, stepping onto the porch but keeping a respectful distance. "How do you do it?" "How do you not fall apart?" James considered the question carefully. "I fall apart all the time," he admitted. "Some nights after the kids are asleep, I sit in my room and cry because I miss my wife so much I can barely breathe. But then morning comes and my kids need breakfast. They need help with homework. They need someone to listen to their problems and celebrate their victories. So I get up and I show up, not because I'm strong, because they deserve someone who's present even when it's hard." Claire's father was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I've been a coward." "You've been grieving," James corrected gently. "But your daughter has been grieving too, and she's been doing it alone. I see that now." Her father looked at Claire, and for the first time in 3 years, he didn't look away. "When your assistant told me you were coming here every week, spending entire afternoons with people I'd never met, I felt jealous. Actually jealous. These strangers were getting the time with you that I should have had. So I looked into you," he said to James. I had someone run a background check. James raised his eyebrows but didn't seem offended. And I found out you're a high school art teacher who coaches the junior basketball team, volunteers at the community center, and somehow manages to be at every single one of your kids' school events. You make $35,000 a year, drive a 10-year-old car, and by all accounts, you're a better father than I've ever been. Money doesn't make someone a good parent, James said simply. No, Claire's father agreed. It doesn't, and I'm starting to understand that. He crouched down in front of Claire's wheelchair, something he hadn't done since the accident. I can't promise I'll be perfect. I can't promise I won't mess up or fall back into old patterns, but I want to try. I want to be the father you deserve. Will you give me a chance? Claire looked at her father, really looked at him. She saw the gray in his hair that hadn't been there before, the lines around his eyes, the exhaustion and guilt written across his face. He wasn't some untouchable CEO in this moment. He was just a broken man who'd lost his way. I don't need you to be perfect, Claire said through her tears. I just need you to try, to actually show up, to have dinner with me, to ask about my day and actually listen to the answer. Can you do that? Yes, he said firmly. I can do that. Lily's voice came from inside. Are we still having spaghetti? Because I'm really hungry. Despite everything, Claire laughed. Her father smiled too, a real smile that reached his eyes.
Would it be inappropriate if I stayed for dinner?
He asked James. I'd like to meet the people who've been there for my daughter when I wasn't. James smiled warmly. You're welcome to stay. Though I should warn you, Lily asks a lot of questions and David will probably challenge everything you say. They're not easily impressed by titles or money. Good, Claire's father said. I don't want them to be. Dinner was awkward at first. Claire's father sat stiffly at the small kitchen table, clearly out of his element. But Lily, being Lily, didn't let the awkwardness last long. So you're really rich? She asked bluntly, ignoring her father's warning look. Lily, James started, but Claire's father held up a hand. I am, he said honestly. I run a big company. Does that make you happy? The question was so simple, so direct, that it seemed to catch him off guard. I thought it did, he said slowly. But lately I'm not so sure. My dad says happiness doesn't come from stuff, Lily announced. It comes from people you love and doing things that matter. Is your company doing things that matter? Claire watched her father struggle with the question. She'd never seen him like this, uncertain, searching for answers he didn't have. I think it used to, he finally said. But somewhere along the way I forgot why I started it in the first place. I forgot what really matters, David spoke up quietly. It's not too late to remember. Such simple wisdom from a 10-year-old. Claire saw something shift in her father's expression. A lightness that hadn't been there before. They finished dinner with easier conversation. Her father asked the kids about school, about their interests, about their dreams. He listened to their answers, really listened. And when it was time to leave, he didn't send the driver. He wheeled Claire to his car himself. Thank you, he said to James at the door, for being there for her, for showing me what being present actually looks like. She's a remarkable person, James said. You're lucky to be her father. I know, Claire's father said, and he sounded like he finally meant it. On the drive home, he didn't make a single business call. He just talked to Claire, asking about her week, her piano playing, her friendship with Lily and David. And for the first time in 3 years, Claire felt like maybe, just maybe, she was getting her father back. Change didn't happen overnight. Claire knew that. Her father knew that too. But slowly, day by day, things started to feel different. The first real change came 3 days after that dinner. Claire was in her room when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Not the housekeeper's quiet shuffle or the assistant's hurried click of heels. These were different. Her father appeared in the doorway, still wearing his work clothes but with his tie loosened and his jacket over his arm. I was thinking we could have dinner together tonight, he said. No phones, no work. Just us. Claire looked at him skeptically. You have a board meeting at 7. I saw it on the calendar. I canceled it. Those 3 words hung in the air. Her father never canceled meetings, never. You did? He nodded and sat down on the edge of her bed, something he hadn't done since before the accident. I realized something the other night at James's house. I've spent 3 years running from my grief, hiding behind work, telling myself I was doing the right thing by providing for you. But all I was really doing was abandoning you, and I don't want to do that anymore. Dinner that night was quiet at first. They sat across from each other at the large dining table that usually felt too big, too empty. The cook had made Claire's favorite pasta dish, and her father had actually remembered what her favorite was. That small detail made Claire's throat tight. "Tell me about piano," her father said. "When did you start playing again?" So Claire told him. About that first day at James's house. About Lily's enthusiasm and terrible technique. About how teaching her had somehow opened something in Claire that she'd thought was closed forever. She told him about playing Chopin, about how her fingers remembered even when her mind had tried to forget. Her father listened without interrupting, without checking his phone, without that distant look he usually got when she talked. He was actually there, present in a way that made Claire realize just how much she'd missed him. "Your mother would be so proud," he said quietly when she finished. "She always said music was in your soul, that you could lose everything else, but you'd never lose that." It was the first time in 3 years he'd mentioned her mother without leaving the room immediately after. Claire felt tears building but fought them back. "Do you remember her last words to me?" Claire asked. "In the car before the accident?" Her father shook his head, his expression pained. She said, "I'm so proud of you." That was it. Her last words were about being proud of me. Claire's voice broke. "And then she was gone, and you couldn't even look at me anymore, and I started thinking maybe there wasn't anything left to be proud of." Her father stood up abruptly and came around the table. He knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her hands in his. "Listen to me. Your mother was proud of you. I'm proud of you. Not because of what you can or can't do physically, but because of who you are. You're strong and talented and kind. And I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't enough. Because you are. You always have been." Claire couldn't hold back the tears anymore. She leaned forward and hugged her father, and he held her like he used to when she was little before everything fell apart. They stayed like that for a long time, both of them crying, both of them finally letting themselves grieve together instead of alone. Things got better after that. Not perfect, but better. Her father started coming home for dinner every night. He'd ask about her day and actually listen to her answers. They started watching movies together on weekends, arguing about which ones were good and which ones were terrible. He even started going to her physical therapy sessions, not just paying for them, but actually being there, cheering her on when she made progress. The Saturdays at James's house continued too. In fact, they got even better because now both families started spending time together. Her father and James developed an unlikely friendship, bonding over single parenting and loss and trying to do better. David taught her father how to play video games, which was hilarious because her father was terrible at them. Lily appointed herself as everyone's life coach, constantly giving advice that was surprisingly wise for an 8-year-old. 2 months after that first birthday dinner at the restaurant, Claire's father came home with an announcement. "I've been thinking," he said over dinner, "about what really matters, about what I want my company to stand for." He paused. "I'm starting a new initiative. We're going to work on accessibility technology, wheelchairs, home modifications, software that helps people with disabilities. I want to use what we have to actually help people." Claire stared at him. "Really? Really? And I was hoping you might want to be involved. As a consultant. Someone who actually knows what it's like, what's needed, if you're interested." Claire felt something bloom in her chest. Hope. Purpose. The feeling of being seen and valued, not despite her wheelchair, but including all of who she was. "I'm interested." Her father smiled, that genuine smile she'd seen so rarely. "Good, because I'm going to need your help. James suggested we start by making schools more accessible." Lily apparently gave him a whole speech about how her friend Claire should be able to go to regular school. Lily said that. She did. She's quite passionate about it. She even drew up plans, though I'm not sure they're structurally sound. There's a moat involved for some reason. Claire laughed, imagining Lily's elaborate drawings. That sounds like her. The months passed, and life continued to change in small but significant ways. Claire started going to therapy. Real therapy, where she talked about her feelings and her grief and her anger. Her father went too, separately at first, then together sometimes. They learned how to talk to each other, how to be honest without hurting each other, how to move forward while still honoring what they'd lost. The accessibility initiative took off faster than anyone expected. Her father hired people with disabilities to lead the projects, listened to their input, actually implemented their suggestions. Claire found herself in meetings, giving presentations, making a difference. She wasn't just the CEO's daughter anymore. She was Claire, advocate and consultant, and someone whose voice mattered. James and his kids remained a constant presence in their lives. The two families spent holidays together, creating new traditions that honored their losses while celebrating what they'd found. Lily's piano playing improved dramatically under Claire's teaching, though she still played with more enthusiasm than precision. David and Claire's book club expanded to include her father, who discovered he actually enjoyed reading when he made time for it. One year after that lonely birthday, Claire found herself back at the same restaurant. But this time the table wasn't empty. Her father sat on one side, James and his kids on the other. The owner had even given them the same corner table, recognizing them from the year before. Lily had insisted they needed to recreate the birthday, but better this time with everyone there. As the waiter brought out the cake, Claire looked around at the faces surrounding her. Her father, who'd learned to show up. James, who'd shown them all what being present looked like. David, who challenged her to think deeper. And Lily, who'd seen a lonely girl and decided that wasn't acceptable. "Before we sing," Claire said, "I just want to say thank you. Last year I was sitting here alone, convinced that's how things would always be. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. But then you," she looked at James and his kids, "you came over and asked if you could join me, and somehow that one moment changed everything." "It changed things for us too," James said quietly. "You reminded my kids that kindness matters, that reaching out matters, that everyone has a story worth knowing." Her father cleared his throat, emotion evident in his voice. "And you," he looked at James, "you showed me what I was throwing away. You gave me the wake-up call I desperately needed. I'll never be able to repay that." "You don't have to repay anything," James said. "That's not how friendship works." Lily tugged on Claire's sleeve. "Can we sing now? I've been practicing a special harmony part." Everyone laughed, and then they sang. The whole restaurant joined in again, just like the year before. But this time, when Claire closed her eyes to make a wish, she realized she didn't need to wish for anything. Everything she'd needed had already come true. She had her father back. She had friends who felt like family. She had purpose and passion, and a future that felt bright instead of empty. She had learned that wheelchairs don't define people, that grief doesn't have to be faced alone, and that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. As she blew out the candles, Lily cheered, David applauded, James smiled with tears in his eyes, and her father reached over and squeezed her hand. And Claire knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The lonely girl from last year was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who'd learned that being vulnerable wasn't weakness, that accepting help wasn't failure, and that family wasn't just about blood. It was about showing up, being present, and choosing love even when it's hard. Later that night, as they were leaving the restaurant, Lily hugged Claire tightly. "Same time next year?" she asked. Claire laughed. "Definitely. Same time next year." But this time she knew she wouldn't be sitting alone. She'd never have to sit alone again. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to ask, "Can we join you?" To change everything. And sometimes being brave enough to say yes is all you need to find your way home.